Dungeons & Dragons has been around for over half a century, and in that time it's cultivated millions of players, dungeon masters and fans from across the globe. Thanks to the visionary imaginations of Gary Gygax and Dave Arneson, tales of heroism and a fair share of villainy have been enacted in homes, accompanied by dice, character sheets, plenty of snacks and a fair amount of funny NPC voices. We here at Eurogamer have even collaborated with Dicebreaker on our very own series that follows the shenanigans of the Break Quest Club. But what is it about D&D that's turned it into a much-loved tabletop RPG, and, arguably, the most famous one in the entire world? We spoke to professional Dungeons & Dragons players at the Lucca Comics and Games Festival in Italy to find out why it's been revived in the last decade and captured so many hearts, and impaled them on spikes if you have an especially evil party. Here's why Dungeons & Dragons matters to so many people and how its revival has introduced it to a whole new generation.
You know, I think Gary Gygax was onto something. It came out of wargaming. You know, there was a real tradition of carrying out or reenacting battles and seeing and trying to be as realistic as possible to these armies battling. And Gary said, well, what if you were just one soldier rather than the whole army? Which was a revolutionary idea. And so you could come up with your name, you could come up with a backstory for that soldier, and then furthermore, what if you could increase in level, which was we take for granted now, every video game you level up. That came from Dungeons & Dragons. So they were really on to something, and I think then from there, Gary said, well, what if you could just fight dragons and fight imaginary creatures in dungeons, which was also a revolutionary idea at the time.
They captured that in doing so kind of defined fantasy for a lot of people. There's a Tolkien-esque influence in there, but D&D's taken it further than that, and I think now when people think fantasy, they think the sort of standard D&D base set is what they're looking at. And I think it's been pervasive. I know a lot of the comedy writers I know in the US all played D&D when they were coming up. And it's a thing I'm discovering with a lot of comedians in the UK who are certainly my age, is they used to play D&D and haven't for a while, and now getting back into it because, a lot of people, because they want their kids to play it. It's iconic and fun and incredibly accessible at the minute.
When I was a teenager, you couldn't be excited about what you wanted to be excited about, and that in our culture has changed quite a bit for the better, I think. Streaming has made it more accessible, but what I think resonates with people is it's an authentic experience. It's not me interacting with pixels on a screen. I love video games, but that for me is a totally different desire than sitting down with people who I know, that I'm friends with, and telling a story with them. That's when I say that's intimate, that's you are building relationships and friendships and shared experiences with people that kind of transcend just your moment at the game table.
I have a group of friends that I've had for 30 years. And I feel like we all know each other so well, from just silly. We've stayed up and played for 16 hours straight and been I try to open the door. That to me is the biggest thing I get out of it. And that's the best part of working on D&D for me, is I think it just brings people together. There's so many things nowadays that sort of separate people off or drive people apart, and it's just this is the thing that just makes you go, forget it, you don't even have to be you. Just everybody come together and you laugh, and that to me is the best part.
I think for me it's the endless opportunities, right? You create this world and you get everybody on board with that world and that reality, but then once you're in that, pretty much anything goes, right? You can be whoever you want to be, you can do whatever you want to do, and you can interact in the way that you feel cool and comfortable, and almost no other gaming experience or social experience will allow for that, where that level of acceptance is one of the most important parts of the game.
And it breaks out the kid in me I feel like back in the day when you had no worries, you were like playing police dog versus dinosaurs, it's that, but then for grown-ups, you can still sort of use your fantasy and play with it, yeah.
What's my favorite thing about D&D? I think for me, as an ex-thespian kid who grew up doing drama and theatre and had dreams of that, it is the playing pretend. You know, I was the weird, lonely kid that would get shipped off to my nan's after school to wait for mum and dad to finish work, and would be running around in the garden with a dustbin lid as a shield and a stick as a sword and fight imaginary goblins, because I've always lived in a bit of a dreamland, and I think D&D lets me just play, and it lets me be different people, and it's helped me throughout my teenage years and throughout my young adult years learn who I am and learn more about myself, and just being able to play and just have these amazing stories and be these amazing characters that you can't really do in anything else. Even in video games, you know, like it's boundless, and that makes it really special.
So my favorite thing about D&D is, I think, definitely the story. I get really immersed in it, and Mark is a great DM, and he throws us so many really interesting angles and unique situations. And I love the imagery of it, I love the story of it, I love the kind of testing of bonds between people, and I love that it's a social game. You know, you're sat there in a room full of people, and you're interacting with each other, and you're seeing like, oh, how would this person react? How would this person react? I really like the improv of each other, you know, working with each other or against each other, and how you would react to certain situations, and do you work together in a fight, or are you all, you know, have your own interests? And I really like the surprises that come along with that, and yeah, those sweet story moments too.
I think there's a lot of reasons why D&D is becoming vastly more popular now. And I think there's a bunch of reasons, starting with Dan Harmon's community episode and fleshing out through a bunch of other stuff. Like, there's a lot of stuff in sci-fi and fantasy that's had a big resurgence, but Game of Thrones particularly brought people who I think wouldn't usually think they'd enjoy fantasy into a space where they're like, oh, I like this. This is fun, I like it. And that's a gateway drug for a lot of fantasy staples, and D&D is the cultural touchstone for role-playing games. Like, if you ask somebody about tabletop role-playing games, they think about D&D. That's the thing they come up with, and also everyone knows D&D. Not everyone knows what it means, but everyone knows what everyone's heard of Dungeons and Dragons. It is the brand leader in that regard, and I think it's great that that's the case.
It allows people who, maybe for years, have not been allowed or able to express who and what they really want to be. D&D can be cathartic in allowing you to kind of take baby steps into expressing that before you kind of realize it fully in your life as a whole. Another area where it's been very helpful, there's an organization called Take This. They're based out of Seattle, Washington, and they use gaming as a way to help promote mental health. And as someone who's had issues with anxiety and depression and PTSD from my time in the service, D&D is a way I found with veterans to bring people together and help talk about maybe painful experiences in a way that is not so immediate as to be like raw and hurtful, but allow them to interact with those experiences through their character, through a proxy, and then gradually bring that home to themselves and find a kind of a bit of healing and understanding and an ability to talk about something that maybe they wouldn't have felt comfortable talking about.
Dungeons and Dragons, for whatever reason, was stigmatized during the 80s. Unlike other games, it went through this very dark, odd period where it was vilified by church and state. And I think, to me, that makes it an even more interesting history, because there is an exhale in today's world. There is a catharsis in today's world for at least my generation, who lived through all of that and had to stick up for the game through that I think has galvanized us as older players. We all had someone's mother who didn't let the kid play because it was satanic and they thought we were going to kill all the neighborhood cats. And then, of course, now there's a younger generation who's picking it up for the first time, who didn't have to go through any of that never understood. They're like, wait, really? They burnt your books? Yes! This was real. This is a real thing. I couldn't be happier that it's having this renaissance and this golden age, almost 50 years after Gary, Gary and Dave and the gang came up with it. And we have all that history, and this whole library was worth of stories that either haven't been told or need to be retold. And it's just it's worldwide now.
I think people now feel more disconnected and kind of fragmented, even though we have the internet and everything. People feel more fragmented, and D&D is a great way to help them feel more connected, and people need that.
And that's some of the secrets to Dungeons & Dragons' enduring popularity and revival. Hit like if this video made you all warm and fuzzy inside, and subscribe to Eurogamer for more Dungeons & Dragons videos, plus plenty more about video games. Plus, we have our own Dungeons & Dragons campaign named the Break Quest Club. So if you feel a hunger for chaotic shenanigans, I heartily recommend giving our adventures a watch. We release a new video every single day, so there's always something to watch. Now, if you'll excuse me, all this talk of the positive effect of Dungeons & Dragons means I need to go ugly cry in a corner. See you next time.